Okay, I'm Jaden Phillips, and this is my audience. I have them on a video call, and I will be presenting my persuasive speech. Okay. In 1973, Salvador Allende, the president of Chile, died as a result of a coup d'etat. His successor was a man named Augusto Pinochet, and over the next 17 years, this man's government was responsible for the deaths of 40,118 people during the reign of his regime. In 1953, U.S. biochemist Frank Olson fell from a 13-story building and died. In 2004, U.S. journalist Gary Webb committed suicide. What do these seemingly disparate events have in common? The presence of America's Central Intelligence Agency, also known as the CIA. The CIA has a large effect on every event discussed, and I will tell you exactly how. Some of the events I will tell you have been investigated by our own government, and that's where some of this information has come from. If we, as people of America, want to live comfortably, the CIA should be found legally responsible for everything they have done. I think reforms are greatly needed to ensure the safety of U.S. citizens, and I will give you all the reasons why I think this should be done. I will explain all the incidents I previously mentioned and show the CIA's involvement and reasons for suspicion of this organization. To start, let's discuss something that didn't affect American citizens. The CIA's job is to work overseas, so let's see what they're doing over there. The CIA allowed Augusto Pinochet, one of the most infamous dictators in world history, to take power. The CIA, especially back then, would say this was completely justified. Why? Well, Chile had recently held a democratic election and ushered in a socialist politician by the name of Salvador Allende. Then President Nixon advised the CIA to take action and prevent Allende from ruling the country. After funding a coup d'etat that led to his death, Augusto Pinochet was allowed to take over Chile. As a result of that, thousands of Chilean citizens were killed, tortured, and disappeared under his rule. According to a 2023 article by Bill Bigelow of ZindProject.com, the U.S.'s former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, said, "I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people." Nixon would eventually authorize for $10 million to be used for a mission to unseat the socialist leader. This mission obviously succeeded, and while the CIA's job is to operate overseas, does our government have the right to topple governments and distort countries for our own political goals? Now that we've discussed their acts overseas, let's talk about some of their acts within our country. The CIA kidnapped and drugged some citizens to create mind control. For 20 years, starting in the 50s, the CIA experimented on thousands of U.S. citizens in Project MKUltra. This was started to this was started in an attempt to create mind control. Agents used psychedelics and sensory deprivation to try to destroy the subject's mind. Under the leadership of CIA chemist and poison expert Sidney Gottlieb, the technique was pioneered. In a 2017 article from NPR, Gottlieb wanted to create a way to seize control of people's minds, and realized it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away the existing mind, and second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into the resulting void. We didn't get too far on number two, but he did a lot of work on number one. The biochemist mentioned earlier, the first paragraph, Frank Olson, worked on this project before his feelings of guilt consumed him. He quit the project, and at a meeting, he and several associates were drugged without consent. He was moved to a hotel in Manhattan, where a few days later he fell out of the 13th floor window. His death was ruled as a suicide, and the CIA acknowledged that he had been drugged. However, there was no deeper investigation. That is until Olson's family questioned the conditions surrounding his death and asked for another autopsy, which resulted in findings that showed he had suffered blunt force trauma prior to his fall. However, it didn't stop there for presumed crimes against U.S. citizens. Webb launched a news story that allegedly exposed the CIA's ties to the drug trade. It was said that the CIA flooded the streets with cocaine in order to fund a war against Nicaraguan communist rebels. While this initially sounds far-fetched, the government has actually had ties to the Contras, an anti-communist militia in Nicaragua. And there was the infamous Iran-Contra affair, which showed the U.S. government's ties to the Contras because they gave their money from selling weapons to Iran to use to fund them. Gary Webb had talked to drug dealers and people involved with the militias, and they confirmed that the CIA was involved. However, nothing could be definitively proven. According to his 26, and while this wasn't proven, the reason why it took root in the public consciousness was because, according to a 2016 and CNN article by Tom LoBianco, the aide of President Nixon, he says the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We can arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news if we associate them with drugs. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. This shows a direct tie to the government and the war on drugs and the reasons behind it. Shortly after Gary Webb's article, around 8 years after Gary Webb's articles were released, he committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. While there were two gunshots, it is possible for this to not even be tied to them. And me bringing this up doesn't mean that I'm saying the government did it. However, if even for a few seconds you were convinced that our own government would kill a journalist, what does that say about the government institution being discussed? With all of that said, should this organization be trusted? The CIA is a morally bankrupt institution that can seemingly avoid receiving proper justice, even if they act against their own citizens. They've meddled in democratic elections and have allowed dictators to take over, and they've also tortured their own citizens. We need to do everything in our power to have more transparency with the public or Congress regarding the actions of the CIA so we can all feel safe within our own country. The CIA has surely done plenty of good, but does that outweigh the bad they've done? Okay, that is it. That's close enough.